I'm wondering if this community has done anything like that. I mean, I can think of so many parallels between like Native Americans in the U.S. around the establishment of national parks, or like Haitians, people of Haitian descent in the Dominican Republic, or like all of these aspects of their situation that are similar.
Or so many Afro-descendant communities all over Central and South America and the Caribbean, definitely. And to my knowledge, no, but I don't know everything about these communities and what they've done. Not that I know of, but there has been discussion. Emily and I have discussed the idea of trying to connect with advocates for other communities who are working on these issues to resource share and share strategies about how these, specifically usually issues related to land, how they're being addressed. These students might be able, you guys might want to speak a little bit, because they're doing work at Northeastern to look at some questions of law. They're still early in the stages of the research, but that's one of the questions that I presented to them, was to look at an international context of land rights and property regimes that have protections for ethnic minorities or even specifically Afro-descendant populations. Because one of the challenges of finding sort of a legal hook within international law is the protections that are available. Most protections that are available for minority populations are through indigenous protections, and these communities are not indigenous in the traditional sense. I think there's some philosophical underpinnings to the reasons that we provide protections for indigenous communities that they would have parallels with, but they're not the native. There are indigenous communities that were here long before these communities, but these communities have been here for centuries, have a historical tradition that is deeply rooted to this area. And so there are some parallels that can be drawn to those types of legal advocacy, but there's no international law specifically providing international protection to Afro-descendant communities. So that's a challenge, and that's a really good point, is how we sort of connect with advocates in other communities and learn from their example and what we can do to try to make this project as accessible to other communities as well, to learn from this example.
Are there ways as students that we can be involved in this issue?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
That's part of the long-term plan, or long-term, short-term, like next steps. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I'm emphasizing like the as an advisor in terms of the archive aspect of it. My first step then would be to travel to Costa Rica and get and get involved with the community, and then from that get a sense of, okay, what can we contribute, and definitely that where students definitely is something that since the beginning, regardless of how the plan develops, we want students that are interested in these issues to also be involved in some way. We'll think some strategies within the school, but it's definitely something that, we want students to also learn about that, and if they want to be involved in some aspects, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, in even more immediate term, feel free to contact me, because I'm always looking for volunteers to help with different aspects of the project's development. And I am a lawyer by training, so I'm not an archivist. So, I mean, Joel is wonderful and has been very, very, productive and useful and helpful in this whole process. But there's definitely room to have more involvement. So, if you're interested,
or can you email me, or
I'll hand out my card before you
definitely.
leave.
Okay. Run away.
I have a question.
Yeah.
There seems to be, obviously, the Rich Coast Project, there's these international efforts, or people from other countries that are looking to help these people secure land rights. And then you're looking to get advocates from the community, obviously important, because they need to be central in developing an archive on their own identity. What about, what efforts are ongoing or maybe are lack for people, just Costa Ricans, who are not Talamancan, nonprofits, or I don't know, what kind of efforts are ongoing for people within Costa Rica who are not Talamancan to be aware of the issue?
Well, there's news about this issue all the time. The extent to which people understand what's going on from a human perspective is a good question, because the essential conflict here is that, so Costa Rica, I don't know how much you know about Costa Rica or its political or history and current situation, but Costa Rica is very much a country that is known for its environmental protection and its human rights record. Those are two things that it has a very strong record of and is very, very proud of, and rightfully so. I think something like, okay, I don't want to say the wrong number, but it's a huge portion of Costa Rica's land is under some form of conservation protection, whether it's national park, the zoning law we talked about, or wildlife refuge. And so that being said, there's a reputational factor for Costa Rica for its conservation policy. They have a right to the environment in their constitution, which I mentioned earlier. There is also a very real sense of pride amongst Costa Rican citizens for this sense of environmental consciousness, and that is coming from the United States. That's like, whoa, this is so awesome. People actually really care and like are proud of caring. And as you travel around Costa Rica, you'll see why. They have a beautiful country. Every part of it is gorgeous, and it's very diverse ecologically, very diverse. And so that's very important to them to protect. However, that being said, when something rises to the level of importance that it has policymakers and legislators paying attention to it, there's the inevitable opportunity for corruption to become involved in other ways. So I also don't know how much you know about the international conservation regime, generally speaking, or carbon trading, but to boil it down really, really basically, Costa Rica is paid by other countries for conserving. So countries like China, who have a development agenda that is dependent on being able to pollute, will actually pay a country like Costa Rica to conserve so that it doesn't have to. So this whole carbon trading scheme really brings a huge financial advantage to Costa Rica. There's also the financial advantage of having this reputation for environmental consciousness, which attracts lots of visitors. Ecotourism is their #1 industry. So that's another way that they're incentivized to really care about environmental protection at a legislative level. And unfortunately, this level of importance for conservation, it comes to the detriment of local communities. At least that's what's happening now. So the extent to which people know about it. I mean, people are at least vaguely aware about it. What they might think about it, though, is that Afro-Caribbean communities on the coast are raising a big stink because they don't want to be part of a national park, or because they want to be able to sell their land, or they want to be able to build hotels, or they want to be able to make money off of the land that they have in some way. That's sort of, I think, a lot of people's base understanding or impulsive reaction to what's happening. So there also is a huge need for education within the country about the actual impact on the ground and the actual motivations of these communities to protect their ownership rights.
How many people are we talking about in the community?
So I think that's hard to quantify because we're really going to be focusing on coastal community. The population of Talamanca as a region, which encompasses a lot more inland, but it's also very sparsely populated, is, I believe, 20,000 people. So it's a significant number of people. But it really just depends on how you define it. And also there's not a lot of really good information quantifying population sizes and demographics in the area. So it's hard for me to feel like I'm giving an accurate number on that. But I think it's an interesting topic for a lot of reasons, because there's these sort of unspoken incentives that fly contrary to the ability to point at a bad guy. It's really hard. So that's why it's, I think, the thrust of doing a project that focuses on talking about experiences and telling stories and really seeing from a human perspective how these laws, whether or not they have good intentions, how they're actually playing out on the ground is the most important thing to focus on. Because not only are they having really negative impacts on the communities and their ultimate cultural survival, but they're also having worse impacts on the environment that they're supposed to be protecting. So the idea of taking away someone's ownership to a piece of property also takes away their incentive to care for that property. And the Costa Rican government doesn't have the capacity to replace those native stewards with government officials to oversee the land. And so now land that was once cared for by the local community is basically gone uncared for. People no longer have the incentive to preserve their resources. On the contrary, they actually are incentivized to cut down the trees, because if there are no trees on their land, then their land isn't considered national forestry land. And if it's not considered national forestry land, it's not subject to this interpretation of the Constitution that says that all national forestry land is inherently property of the Costa Rican government. So, like, there's a really negative and perverse incentive going on here where they're trying to protect the environment, but they're actually destroying the environment and a culture that's dependent on the environment. So it's complicated, right?
I think also, I was thinking of going back to the question about how students can get involved and not just waiting until the field. But if you're interested in kind of learning more about the project and learning about the issues, we can kind of create some sort of group that I'll be happy to kind of be part of. Like, you can email me, or I have a piece of paper here. You can sign up here with your email, or we can think about perhaps regular meetings to just have conversations and start brainstorming and see some progress in that, and get your perspective also and your point of view. I mean, that'll be really helpful for all of us and for the project. So,
and I'd be really interested in thinking about that in other programs as well, students from other disciplines, because I think it's really important to have these conversations. Across disciplines.
Yeah, I'm the advisor, but I don't tend to know everything about how to deal with the archives and all this. There's a lot of questions that I know is important to raise. So yeah, if you're interested, we can create this group and continue this conversation at the school and collaborate, definitely.
And just sort of a last minute shameless plug, we are fundraising for our return trip. Like any important social justice work, it's hard to find people to pay for it. So if you're interested in this project, I mean, consider donating yourself, but even more importantly, share it with your networks, tell as many people as possible about it, and encourage them to support it. Even a little bit helps. It's on Indiegogo. It's the Rich Coast Project. Our website is therichcoastproject.org. So visit that, share it liberally.
Was that video on the website?
Yes.
As well? Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a YouTube page which is linked to the main website, and there's a few videos. I only have videos from 2 people I talked to up on there now. I have more videos. I'm not a videographer, I'm not an editor, so it's not something that comes easily or quickly to me. So, but eventually the idea is to have a diverse range of stories online. That's pretty much the goal of the project. That's why we're taking a filmmaker with us.
Okay.
So I'm going to write my email up here since I don't have my cards with me. Please write this down. Please email me. Please visit the website. Please like us on Facebook. Please stay in touch. That's right. Any more questions while we're here? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Give us a piece of paper. Let's create a group.
Yes.
And please take some on the way home.
I will. Yeah.
Sorry you're really late.
No, I'm so glad you guys could make it.
I was just telling John that more like in this last hour.
I know, I wish I could just like chat with you guys now. So like, if I'm allowed to just chat with you guys, I'm not gonna have to at any point. I feel like there's
That's
a lot
one of
of
the frustrations with projects.
You're on like,
There's so much filter on there.
there is.
And we want to like do as much as we can, but like they're kind of or just
Would they ever let us fundraise? I think so, probably not.
Actually, just left with me.
I know.
Did you ever get to the lessons?
No, not recently yet.
Like, you like set up.
Okay, I think
I just thought about today. I was like,
Just do it.
that's the thing that we have to do. That's the thing that's got to get done.
I'm going to be honest with you. Just for like, yeah, go with it. If you're worried about it.
yeah.
Spreading it into different networks. I feel like I've been really pushing on my own personal network, but there's only
No, yeah, like,
so
I didn't try to do daily to-do lists, and those just things get crumpled and back to the end of my bag, and then I try to make another one, and work it up.
process.
Oh my god. Wow. That's why I don't guess I feel like I'll be able to, I guess I feel like I'll be able to,